The Seattle Seahawks just sent a warning shot across the entire NFC, and the wild part is that it came on a night when they were a handful of plays away from getting buried with the same old doubts. A 1-point overtime escape against the Los Angeles Rams sounds like chaos, but the way this team walked off the field felt like something else entirely. Like a group that finally knows who it is and is not afraid to show it. This did not look like a lucky bounce for a fringe playoff team. It looked like the moment the conference had to stop asking if Seattle is for real, and start asking how to deal with them if they grab that top seed. One game flipped the entire picture, and everyone in the NFC now has to pay attention to what just showed up in Seattle. What makes this so dangerous for the rest of the conference is that it is not built on one star or one phase carrying everything. You have Sam Darnold taking every snap with his past hanging over him, then answering late with throws that demand trust when the game is on the line. You have Rashid Shaheed, who can touch the ball once and swing an entire stadium from silent to electric, and backs like Kenneth Walker III, who turns simple runs into shock plays that keep drives alive when the passing game stalls. On the edges, Jackson Smith-Njigba keeps finding space in traffic. Cooper Kupp is punishing his former team in clutch moments, and behind all of that, there is a defense that is getting more physical every week. Put that together, and you are staring at a team that can realistically fight its way to a record like 12 wins and 3 losses, with the NFC running through Lumen Field. The scary part is that this new version of the Seattle Seahawks only exists because they first had to stare down another nightmare, right in front of their own crowd. Before the celebration, the Rams were in control, the offense was sputtering, and that uneasy feeling from past collapses started creeping back into the building. The shift from almost giving the game away to grabbing the entire conference by the throat did not happen by accident, and the way that tide turned is where the real story lives. To understand why this win should worry every contender in the NFC, you have to see just how close Seattle came to losing everything before the comeback even began. But before we get into that, hit that like and subscribe button for more Seahawks and all the NFL content. Let's aim for 300 likes on this video. For a long stretch, it felt like the Seattle Seahawks were watching their season tilt the wrong way in slow motion. The Rams kept marching, the crowd noise kept dropping, and every empty drive from Seattle made the whole building feel heavier. Matthew Stafford was in rhythm, finding Puka Nacua, Kieran Williams, and Blake Corum in space while the Seahawks offense kept walking off the field too fast. And you could almost feel that old fear creeping back that this might be another night that ends with questions instead of belief. The tension really started to rise when the small errors turned into real damage. A sloppy red here from Sam Darnold, a late throw there, a ball slipping away from Cooper Kupp near the goal line, and suddenly chances that should have been points were turning into long answers for Los Angeles. Flags wiped out field position, early screens got blown up, and the defense had to jog back out again with almost no rest while chasing crossing routes and play-action fakes from Matthew Stafford that looked way too comfortable. Inside the stadium, the energy shifted from loud confidence to that quiet buzz of worry where everybody can see the clock moving and the scoreboard leaning the wrong way. That is the part of the story that makes what happened next so heavy on the quarterback. While the Rams were stacking momentum, all the pressure started to land squarely on Sam Darnold, and how he would respond to a night that was starting to slide out of control. The fans could feel it, the sideline could feel it, and the rest of the NFC was watching to see if this would be another chapter of the same old doubts or something different. The answer to that question is exactly where the focus goes next. Because how Sam Darnold handled that growing storm is the real turning point in this entire run. For Sam Darnold, this was not just another primetime game. It felt like a full career review happening in real time. Every mistake dragged ghosts from New York and Carolina back into the conversation. Every shaky series reminded people of how things ended in Minnesota. And every throw carried that unspoken question of whether he could really be the guy for a team with this much on the line. When the interceptions came and the Rams started to tilt the field, it was easy for people to say they had seen this story before, a talented arm slipping just when the stage gets biggest. The truth is, the stakes were bigger than the box score, because one bad finish here would have given critics all the fuel they needed to say nothing had changed at all. What actually changed was the way Sam Darnold handled the storm once it hit him. After the second pick, he did not melt on the bench or start firing blind into coverage. He stayed locked in, helmet on, talking with his linemen and listening to the tweaks coming from the sideline. When he went back out, you could see the shift in how he was being used and how he saw the field. Under center with hard play fakes, boots that moved the launch point, simple layered reads, he started to hit throws that demand timing and nerve. The strike to A.J. Barner on the blown coverage, the tight sideline ball to Cooper Kupp, the way he fed Jackson Smith and Jigba in traffic, all of it looked like a quarterback finally playing in a structure that fits what he does best instead of fighting against it. By the time overtime arrived, Sam Darnold was no longer just trying to hang on to his job, he was controlling the huddle in a way that made the whole sideline believe again. He still had the turnovers on his record, but now they sat beside late-game decisions that showed poise, not panic, and that matters more to teammates than any clean stat line ever will. That is why this night will follow him for the rest of the season, because it felt like the moment he stopped running from his past and started rewriting it in front of the entire conference. The only thing missing was the spark that woke the whole building up and gave him a second chance to swing. And that came from a player who can flip a game with a single touch, which is where Rashid Shaheed and the power of special teams enter the story. The entire game turned the moment Rashid Shaheed caught that short punt with a little bit of space and a lot of chaos in front of him. Seattle had been tight, the stadium had gone almost numb, and it felt like every mistake was stacking on top of the last one. Then he cut through the first wave, slipped past a desperate angle, broke into the open field, and it was like somebody hit a switch on the whole building. The noise poured back in, the sideline came alive, and for the first time all night the Rams looked like the ones trying to hang on instead of the ones in control. One return did more than add points, it ripped the doubt out of the air. What makes Rashid Shaheed so dangerous is that he attacks special teams like other players attack fourth quarter drives. He has done this before in his career, but in Seattle it feels different because the staff treats that phase like a real weapon, not just a change of possession. When he is back there, every punt becomes a question for the other sideline. Are you sure you want to give him another chance? You can see how his confidence spills over into everyone else. Sam Darnold starts playing looser because he knows the field can flip without a perfect drive. The defense runs out with fresh legs and new energy, and even the crowd starts to believe they are one mistake away from another big swing. That kind of threat lives in the back of every opponent's mind as soon as the ball leaves the punter's foot. That same alert mindset showed up again when the snap went wild on the late two-point try, and Zach Charbonnet refused to freeze. Instead of staring at a broken play, he scooped the ball, found the end zone, and turned something ugly into another steal that kept Seattle breathing. Later, when the design to leak Eric Sober free for the walk-off conversion hit, it felt like the final proof that this team is trained to squeeze value out of every strange moment. Those hidden plays do not happen without a group that is locked in right down to the third phase. And the more often Seattle cashes in like that, the easier it becomes for them to lean into the style they really want. That style lives in the backfield with Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet. And once they start pounding on a defense, the whole identity of this offense comes into focus. When everything felt shaky through the air, the Seattle Seahawks leaned on the one thing that did not flinch: the run game. Every time the crowd started to tense up, a handoff to Kenneth Walker III turned into a burst that snapped the energy back to life. He was not just moving the chains, he was ripping off runs that made the Rams' defense look late and unsure, including that long score where he bounced outside and left angles in the dust. By the end of the night, you looked at a line like 11 carries for 100 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, and it still felt like the numbers were underselling how many times he saved a drive that was about to stall. Right behind him, Zach Charbonnet played the role that winning teams quietly rely on every week. He lowered his pads into traffic, finished runs through contact, and turned what should have been short gains into tough first downs that kept the playbook wide open. His rushing touchdown mattered just as much as any deep shot because it reminded the Rams that they had to respect both backs at all times. Up front, the story was just as important. Gray Zabel is a rookie learning on the fly at guard, Josh Jones had to handle life at tackle with Charles Cross out, And this group still kept grinding on a front that was throwing everything at them. They were not perfect, but they were stubborn. And that mindset is what allowed the backs to keep punishing tired defenders late. The real danger for future opponents is what this ground attack unlocks when it is rolling. Once defenses start creeping safeties down to deal with Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet, the field opens up for Sam Darnold to turn his back, sell a hard fake, and fire off play-action throws that slice into the soft spots they just created. Long drives suddenly feel easier, time of possession tilts, and games start to look like a test of who can survive 4 quarters of that constant body blow style. That pounding on offense sets the tone for the other side of the ball, because if Seattle is going to lean into this physical identity, the front 7 on defense has to match it snap after snap. And that is exactly where the next part of this story takes a serious turn. From the opening whistle, you could see the Seattle front deciding they were done being treated like a soft spot. Every time the Rams tried to lean on the ground game, the ball met a wall instead of daylight. Kyren Williams and Blake Corum were used to turning simple handoffs into clean lanes, but in this one they kept running into traffic. DeMarcus Lawrence locked down the edge, squeezing outside runs back into the pile, while Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams crashed through gaps and met backs at the line before they could build any rhythm. Instead of 5 and 6 yard bursts, the Rams were fighting for 2 and 3, and that slow squeeze started to change what they could even call on early downs. Once the run was no longer a safety net, the whole tone of the pass rush shifted. On long passing downs, you could see DeMarcus Lawrence win with power. Leonard Williams collapsed the pocket from the inside, and Uchenna Nwosu slipping past tackles to force Matthew Stafford into throws that came out faster than he wanted. Behind them, Ernest Jones read screens, closed on crossers, and cleaned up underneath so nothing cheap turned into a back-breaking gain. Even Derek Hall, still growing into his role, flashed as another edge who could keep contain and chase the ball when Stafford tried to extend plays. It was not one superstar taking over. It was a full unit that refused to let the Rams feel comfortable in any phase for very long. The ripple effect of that front 7 was massive for everything behind it. With the run under control and the pocket collapsing in waves, the safeties could stay deeper. The corners could focus on routes instead of constantly worrying about filling gaps. And the calls from the sideline could get more aggressive without opening giant holes in the middle of the field. That is exactly where the game tilted in the tightest spots, in the red zone and on the drives that felt like they could break Seattle if one more play went wrong. The front did its job, but the real test of any contender lives in how the back end survives when a star like Puka Nacua is hunting big moments. And that is where the story shifts to a secondary that lived on the edge all night without letting the whole thing snap. All night, the Seattle defensive backs were living in a storm that never really slowed down. Matthew Stafford kept ripping throws into tight spaces, and Puka Nacua was attacking every level of the field with deep outs, crossers, and sideline shots that test even the best corners. Then, the injuries started to hit. Kobe Bryant left, Rick Woolen had to come out, and suddenly Nehemiah Pritchett was being asked to hold up under bright lights against one of the sharpest passing games in the league. It was the kind of situation where a secondary can fold, but this group refused to let the whole game break on their watch. What stood out was how different the defense looked when the Rams crossed into the red zone. Between the 20s, Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua could find soft spots and work timing routes, but once Los Angeles got close, the space vanished. Devin Witherspoon challenged at the catch point, Julian Love kept the back end organized, and tackles near the goal line were finished instead of whiffed. The Rams moved the ball, but they did not finish all the drives that felt like they should have been touchdowns. That quiet difference between long marches and actual scores is what kept Seattle within reach while the offense figured itself out. Those stands in tight areas did more than just save points. They gave the entire sideline belief that if the offense could find one more answer, the defense would hold up its side. When a secondary holds firm under that kind of pressure, it changes how a coach thinks about the endgame. Mike McDonald could afford to be bold later because he had already seen his back end survive every test the Rams threw at them. That trust in his coverage, combined with the front seven's control up front, is what opened the door for the aggressive call in overtime that told the entire NFC exactly how this team plans to play when everything is on the line. That final snap in overtime said more about the Seattle Seahawks than any press conference ever could. With a safe kick sitting right there and a tie on the table, Mike Macdonald chose risk over comfort and put the ball back in Sam Darnold's hands for one more shot. Timeouts were burned to feel out the look. The call came in for that leak to Eric Sauber. And in that moment, Seattle showed every team watching that they are not interested in surviving nights like this. They are trying to steal them. When the catch was made and the game ended on their terms, it felt like a statement that this group would rather live with a bold failure than a cautious finish. That choice hits even harder when you zoom out and look at what is coming next. The path in front of them runs through the Carolina Panthers and the San Francisco 49ers with heavy pressure attached to every single drive. Handle those games and you are talking about home field advantage, extra rest, and playoff afternoons, where visiting teams like the Chicago Bears, Green Bay Packers, or even these same Los Angeles Rams have to deal with a crowd that already tasted a wild win and now expects more. The difference is that those future opponents know exactly what they are walking into. A staff that will push the edge, a quarterback who just proved he will stand in and deliver late, and a roster that leans into chaos instead of fearing it. That is the real message this night sends across the NFC. Seattle is not selling itself as a pretty story or a nice surprise. It is presenting a version built on physical runs from Kenneth Walker III and Zach Charbonnet, swing plays from Rashid Shaheed, hard snaps from a front led by DeMarcus Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Byron Murphy, Ernest Jones, Uchenna Nwosu, and Derek Hall, and a secondary with Devin Witherspoon, Rick Woolen, Kobe Bryant, Nehemiah Pritchett, and Julian Love that just survived a fire drill from Matthew Stafford and Puka Nacua without breaking. If the Seahawks turn that into a full season and lock in the top seed, the real question hanging over the conference is simple and uncomfortable. Which team actually believes it can walk into Lumen Field, stare all of that in the face, and end this run before it reaches the biggest stage?